Let's jump right into this explainer and look at an absolutely incredible piece of history. We're talking about the true story of how a tiny island nation used some wildly chaotic maritime tactics to literally outmaneuver a global superpower. Seriously, what we're digging into today is a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare, and it perfectly shows just how fluid and honestly, how wild the evolution of international boundary laws can really be.
So how exactly did a tiny nation with absolutely zero warships force a massive global superpower to surrender the seas? I mean, it sounds completely impossible, right? But this was an unprecedented David versus Goliath showdown. It kicked off as a relatively simple dispute over territorial waters, but it ultimately changed international maritime law forever. If you've ever looked at a map and wondered why ocean borders are drawn the way they are today, well, this is exactly why.
To really wrap our heads around how they pulled this off, we have to appreciate the sheer asymmetry here. It is hard to overstate. On one side, you have Iceland, a nation relying entirely on a tiny fleet of small patrol vessels. They didn't have a single warship, zero. On the other side, the United Kingdom, rolling in with dozens of heavily armored Royal Navy frigates and tugboats. On paper, it's a total mismatch. But as we're about to see, overwhelming firepower isn't the only way to win a fight on the water.
Part 1. The ancient cannon shot rule and protecting the cod.
To figure out why this massive conflict even ignited, we have to look back at a seriously outdated maritime boundary known as the cannon shot rule. Under this ancient standard, a country's territorial waters only extended 3 nautical miles from its coast. Why 3 miles? Because, believe it or not, that was quite literally the maximum distance a coastal cannon could fire to defend the shore. But because of this archaic rule, massive, highly industrialized foreign fishing fleets were legally allowed to just park themselves right off the coast of Iceland. They were vacuuming up the cod stocks that Iceland's entire economy relied on. Iceland knew they had to act, or they'd be facing total economic ruin.
Part 2. The Cold War leverage, holding NATO hostage. So, facing the collapse of their economy, Iceland desperately needed a way to fight back. But again, no navy. Well, they found their trump card in geopolitical leverage. The crucial detail here is that Iceland basically held the Cold War balance of power hostage. We are at the height of the Cold War, right? And Iceland just so happened to host a critical NATO airbase. Every single time the UK sent their mighty Royal Navy up north to protect their fishing trawlers, Iceland countered with a massive threat. They basically said, keep it up and we'll withdraw from NATO entirely and kick all the American forces out. It was a genius play. They masterfully used their geographic location to force the major powers to rethink those legal maritime boundaries.
And Iceland didn't just jump straight to their final goal. They played the long game, unilaterally expanding their maritime claims in 3 very distinct phases. They started by pushing that ancient 3 nautical mile limit out to 50, and then eventually pushed all the way out to 200 nautical miles. Each one of these expansions triggered a massive international clash, giving us what we now know as the 3 distinct phases of the Cod Wars.
Part 3. The secret trawl cutter, an ingenious non-lethal weapon.
Now, during the Second Cod War between 1972 and 1973, Iceland introduced a brilliant physical tactic to actually enforce that new 50 nautical mile claim. They rolled out an incredibly effective, completely non-lethal tactical weapon called the troll wire cutter. Invented by the Icelandic Coast Guard themselves, this thing was essentially a heavy, 4-pronged grapple equipped with incredibly sharp blades. This became the go-to tool for those tiny patrol boats. But having the tool is one thing. Actually deploying it out there on the water required some absolutely phenomenal, daring seamanship.
Okay, picture the sheer tension of this maneuver on the open ocean. Step 1. The little patrol boat would speed up to a massive foreign trawler operating illegally in their claimed zone. Step 2 is where it gets crazy dangerous. The tiny boat would steer directly across the massive trawler's stern at a right angle. Right as they cross, Step 3, they drop the cutter into the water, dragging it across the trawler's towing warps. Those are the thick steel cables holding the heavy, submerged fishing nets. Finally, Step 4, the grapple snags those cables and the sharp blades slice right through them under the immense tension of the moving ship. The result was instantaneous. The nets, along with the entire catch of fish, would immediately sink straight to the bottom of the ocean. This precision strike neutralized the illegal fishing on the spot, costing the foreign ships thousands of dollars in a matter of seconds. It inflicted absolutely massive financial damage and totally wrecked the trawler's profitability, all without causing a single human casualty. Honestly, it was a tactical masterstroke.
Part 4. Demolition Derby at Sea. When the rules go overboard.
Things eventually boiled over, escalating dramatically during the Third Cod War from 1975 to 1976. This is when Iceland made their boldest move yet, pushing their claim out to a massive 200 nautical miles. At this point, the UK wasn't messing around. They deployed dozens of heavily armored Royal Navy frigates to box in the Icelandic ships. And when that happened, something called COLREGs went right out the window. COLREGs stands for the International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea. These are the sacred standard rules of the road for maritime vessels, dictating who has the right of way and how to navigate safely. But under the intense, white-knuckle pressure of the Third Cod War, these rules just completely collapsed.
Instead of yielding the right of way or avoiding crashes, ships from both sides literally started using their hulls as weapons. Warships were aggressively crowding the tiny patrol boats, executing deliberate rammings designed to disable steering gear or tear open hull plating. And keep in mind, they're doing this in the middle of freezing North Atlantic gales. This conflict evolved from clever net cutting into a high-seas demolition derby. It was a terrifying, dangerous game of maritime chicken, where the standard rules of the ocean were actively weaponized or just totally ignored.
Part 5. Birth of the EEZ. Rewriting the Ocean's Rules.
Ultimately, the sheer aggression, the massive threat to NATO, and the relentless pressure from this tiny underdog nation forced a complete surrender from the global superpowers. And that is the lasting legacy of the Cod Wars. The conflict practically forced the creation of the modern 200 nautical mile limit. This distance is now globally recognized as the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. It is literally the exact standard that governs the entire world's oceans today, all because Iceland simply refused to back down.
It really makes you wonder when you look at a global map today. How many other rigid, formal international laws only exist right now because someone, somewhere, with absolutely everything to lose, decided to completely break the rules? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the boundaries, and I'll catch you next time.